We are being live streamed. I'm gonna hit the record button too. Okay. All right, everybody. Welcome, everyone. We are live on Facebook. So welcome to everybody from 8008 Marlboro Pike, also known as PGCEA Center. We have with us today a great panel. I am Dr. Donna Christie, your president. And we have with us Gary Brennan, our chief negotiator, Dr. Suzanne Windsor, our vice president and chair of the negotiations team, two members of our negotiations team, Justin Robinson and Tammy O'Donnell, and Christy Anderson is MSEA legal counsel to talk about next steps and the process moving forward. So we're going to get right into it, and we're going to go with Gary. Gary's going to set the stage with our negotiations priorities and why they are what they are.
Thank you, Dr. Christie. Can everyone see, Dr. Christie, can you see my the PowerPoint presentation?
Yep.
Real quickly, we wanted to start with kind of a quick review of how we went into this. The PGCA bargaining team has been meeting since August of last year to develop our plan and our priorities and our specific proposals we were bringing into the negotiation sessions with the board's team. One of the things we did early on as we built our bargaining for the common good platform is we surveyed the members. What were the things that they were most concerned about? Obviously, competitive salaries we knew would be the number one concern, and that were salaries that not only kept the employees that PGCPS has, but also compete with the school systems around us so that we could attract the employees we need. Because we all know what happens when positions go unfilled. We had firsthand experience with that this year, and we believe PGCPS had to get serious about making sure they recruited and retained educators in Prince George's County, and that meant a much better salary scale. So we knew that was going to be, if not priority number one of the very top priorities. We also surveyed members about other issues of great importance. And what we found were the things that came up as we surveyed our members. Over a third of our members responded to our survey, which is a fantastic response. And the PowerPoint page you see on the screen right now indicates what were their non-salary priorities. And at the very top, interestingly, was people are tired of the tuition reimbursement program we currently have. They feel tuition reimbursement should be something anyone who qualifies for can get, instead of the kind of Hunger Games approach, filling out your paperwork first. We have reached tentative agreement on that issue. We didn't get everything we wanted, but we did get them to double the amount of money that they put into that system and increase the tuition reimbursement amount per credit hour. So we saw that was one of our top priorities, was to address tuition reimbursement. But the other things that were big issues really had to do with the unreasonable workload, as Dr. Christie calls it, the inhumane workload that teachers and other educators are faced with. 45% of our respondents put as one of their highest priorities increased teacher-directed individual planning time. Smaller class sizes. We did bring in smaller class size language. Unfortunately, the state legislature failed to make that a topic of bargaining, and we had to withdraw some of those proposals. And also, very importantly, 26, almost 30% of people wanted a reduction in non-teaching duties and increased Unit 1 member time on non-student days. So our priorities going in, we had a number of them centered on student needs, but a lot of them centered on teachers and other educators having time and autonomy to do the work that they needed to do. And quite honestly, we believe those proposals don't just benefit educators, they benefit students as well. So the other thing that I just wanted to share was we asked, how much time do you spend outside of your contractual time on work? And the highest number was 6 to 10 hours. 40% of our members are working for free, 6 to 10 hours a week. However, 21.27% do 15 hours or more work after their contractual duty day, and 18.47% we're doing 11 to 15 hours. So we know in order to complete their tasks and to do the work that they're required to do, our members are giving a lot of time. And so that also gave us fuel to bring in proposals specifically to address Unit 1 member workload. I'm going to stop sharing the screen now. So with that being said, we started bargaining seriously in January with the board's team in open session. They were all online. I know a lot of you watching this now probably attended at least some of those virtual sessions. And ultimately, PGCEA declared impasse after our June 9th negotiation session. On June 9th, our team brought a number of counter proposals and withdrawals to the table. We saw that meeting as one where we were going to actually get some hard work done because we knew that was the last chance to reach a tentative agreement. So we brought a number of counter proposals. We were ready to stay online. I'm sorry, my phone is ringing. Stay online all night if we needed to in order to bargain. We were focused and hopeful that the board also would come with that mindset. However, on June 9th, the board did not bring a single proposal to the table. They also didn't respond favorably to a single proposal or counter proposal we brought to the table. On June 9th, they basically stayed exactly where they were on June 2nd. They had stopped bargaining. They could have told us on June 2nd, we're not moving. This is our best and final offer, and we could have saved all the work we had done to seriously prepare for that meeting. So we felt at that point we had no choice but to declare an impasse, and we immediately began the process of requesting the impasse be declared by the state, and Christy Anderson is going to explain that process in more detail later in this meeting. When we declared impasse, I requested that PGCPS join us. I called Howard Burnett, their chief negotiator, and said, Howard, let's do this together. We want to move this process as quickly and expeditiously as possible. PGCPS side refused to do that. When I asked him, because I needed to check a box on the form, did PGCPS agree that impasse had been reached? He said I should check the box. I don't know. So at this point, we're not sure whether or not the system is going to try to fight the impasse declaration or will agree with us that we've gotten as far as we can. So where we stand right now, our contract is expiring on June 30th, 2022, early next week. However, PGCPS has committed that they will honor our existing contract until a new contract settlement is reached. PGCEA will continue to enforce the existing agreement and represent any of our members who, as needed, under the existing contract. So it's not that we don't have a contract, but we're in kind of a weird phase where the new contract, the old contract will stay in force, which does include salary, benefits, work conditions, et cetera. One other thing is we do want to make clear at this in this meeting today, or in this presentation, that the negotiations we engaged in, although we didn't succeed in what we thought were some of the most important items we brought to the table, we did agree on some. And I'm going to have Dr. Windsor speak to that a little bit before I go into some of the specific tentative agreements we have reached.
Thank you, Gary. So I wanted to let everyone know I am very proud of this negotiations team. We had a fabulous team that worked diligently. I don't know how many hours beyond what you saw us doing. We had many historic victories given the amount of proposals that we put forward. And we know that language matters when it comes to protecting our members and advocating for students, because our working conditions are the conditions in which children have to learn. We were fighting in this contract to make sure we had a greater work-life balance because that impacts the health and the well-being of our members. So it's more important than just dollars and cents. It's the quality of our work condition, our work life. So a few victories I wanted to highlight is that we actually got a tentative agreement and language for the transfer process for all teachers, not just those who have been tenured. And that's great for keeping people in our profession because we don't want people getting run off by a principal that's difficult or not trying to work with them in their first 3 years before they have any right to speak for themselves. So now they have that opportunity to get a fresh start at another school. And another big issue is when we come to talking about the mental health and well-being of our students especially coming out of a pandemic, we were able to get tentative agreement on the 11-month for student services, which means that counselors, school psychologists, and pupil personnel workers would be able to have 11 months so they can provide greater services to our students throughout the year and don't have to worry about people trying to subpoena them in during the summer and force them to work for free. So Gary, I'm going to kick it back over to you and thank you for all of your hard work and for your leadership, Dr. Christie.
Thank you, Dr. Windsor, and thank you as well for being a great leader on our team and for our members. So some of the TA, so our expectation is that the things that we have TA'd on, reached tentative agreement, will be a part of the new agreement once we make a settlement on the outstanding issues. So our point of view is these things have been agreed upon. We're not going to relitigate them. We're not going to go back. We have reached agreement over the many months of bargaining. Dr. Windsor pointed a few of the more important ones. One of the things that I think was positive for us had to do with professional development days. In October, we have an MSEA day. It's a professional development day. That day will now be in the contract, a professional development day for teachers, self-directed, and teachers can work from an alternate location. They can work from wherever they want on that day. One other PD day designated in the calendar will also be self-directed PD for Unit 1, Unit 1 members, where they'll be allowed to work from home or an alternative site on that day. Also, the half days that occur at the end of the first, second, and third semesters will also now be full half days, not 2-hour early release, and people will be able contractually to work from home on that half day. For new teachers, pre-service days will be paid at participants per diem rate of pay. Previously, new teachers came in and worked 3 days for free. We thought that was unfair and not right. As Dr. Windsor pointed out, all professional school counselors and PPW workers will become 11-month employees so they can do the work that the system requires of them. And another thing we restored was athletic directors will be full-time 11-month positions. Currently, they are half-time 10-month positions, and all the work of the AD has to be done in the other half day. We also reached agreement on elementary schedules will have to include transition time for specials classes instead of students just backing up immediately into art, music, and PE classes. Special educators on their 5 paperwork IEP compliance days will now be able to work from home or an alternative site. So we urge special educators, take your 5 days and you will not be, we convinced them that working at school was just full of interruptions and they often were told go sub in a classroom when they were supposed to be doing their compliance. Unit 1 members shall not be responsible for taking or recording attendance on dates they are absent. Believe it or not, particularly during COVID and distance learning, the system was telling Unit 1 classroom teachers that even though they were absent and had no way to verify or account for people's attendance, they were responsible for finding the attendance on that day and entering the data. And so we now have contractual language that says if you're out, you are not responsible. That we thought was common sense and kind of shocking. We needed contract language on it. We also limited required responsibilities for contacting parents about grades. You still have to follow the grading policies and procedures, but no longer will you be required to go through and contact parents every time a student grade slips or goes below a certain level. We got really important language on formal observations. Currently, there is no contract languages about observations. All the contract language is only about your final evaluation. So we got a lot of good language around formal observations. As Dr. Windsor pointed out, there's now going to be language to allow non-tenured certified teachers to transfer once during their probationary or non-tenure status through the voluntary transfer process. We saw that as a very significant win. In terms of supplies and workplace issues, each Unit 1 member will receive $100 each September for classroom and workplace supplies. There'll be no paperwork associated with that. You won't have to have receipts. They assume that people spend at least, and we all know, way more than $100, but this is good to get that toe in the door for people to get some money to help pay for that. Working telephones will be required in all classrooms contractually. That was a huge win. Keys or other entry devices to access schools or work sites, assigned offices and classrooms, faculty restrooms, and elevators, if necessary for ADA accommodations, will now be contractually required. That is going to be a huge effort to make sure that this part of the contract is actually carried out. And when people are missing those things, that they cite the contract when they say, I don't have a key to the classrooms that I'm required to teach in, or I don't even have a key to the building that I'm assigned to. We also got language that there will be dedicated spaces in every school for educators to complete confidential tasks. They'll no longer have to work from their cars or a hallway or another classroom when they're having confidential discussions with parents and other educators. There's lots of language that we got to create safer and healthier buildings, including on ventilation, cleaning, workplace safety committees, health and safety committees. I mentioned before, the amount that will be provided for tuition reimbursement is doubling from $2 million to $4 million, and people can now be reimbursed for up to $550 per credit hour. We have created a joint PGCPS union member insurance council. Currently, we have no say when changes are made to insurance rates or the insurance program. And now we will have a place at the table when those decisions are being made, and we will have a part in recommending any changes to the insurance plan or to employee costs, including co-pays, deductibles, and rates. Another one, we've increased to $13,000 per year additional salary for nationally board certified teachers. That came out of the Maryland Blueprint for Education, and also increased to $4,000 per year for other national certifications. We're removing the step 10 cap for teachers and other Unit 1 members coming into our school system. We think that will make it easier to get experienced educators into our schools and fill vacancies, we hope. But also any member who came to PGCPS over the last 3 years during the cap can request that HR review their experience and move them to the correct step according to the experience beyond 10 years if they were capped out. So for some folks, they could see a step increase all the way up to step 21 if they have the experience, if they were hired in the last 3 years. We thought that was really important if we were going to remove the cap, that we make sure that we weren't yet again creating a situation where there would be a group of educators who are not at the same step as new folks coming in. So we thought that was important. The differential scale, all differential scales are going to be increased 4% each year in FY 23, 24, and 25. So that's a 12% increase over time. The same thing for all emoluments and activities. They're going to increase 4% each year in FY 23, 24, 25. Those are pay rates that have not changed in over a decade, I believe. And finally, we're increasing from $500 to $750 per teacher mentored, for each teacher mentored by those recognized by HR as mentor teachers. So they'll now get $750 per mentee if they're in that program. Those are some of the more important. In reality, we had over 60 tentative agreements with the board. That is way more than is usual in any contract negotiation, but it reflects the attitude our team had going into negotiations. And that was, education is in a time of crisis, but also a time in Maryland of great opportunity. So we make no bones. We have no regrets about bringing dozens and dozens of proposals in, because we felt each and every one was necessary to make PGCPS a workplace and a school system that we want to see. And so, yeah, we've reached a lot of agreements. We think a lot of them are good, but our guiding principles of reducing workload and increasing salaries in a way the system can afford that reflects the need to recruit and retain teachers hasn't been met. So that is kind of my report on where we are. We will post all of our tentative agreements on our worksite in one place so folks can see them in the coming days. Thanks, Donna.
Thank you, Gary. And so, yeah, so we have done there. So it hasn't been all gloom and doom. We've actually had a lot of fantastic wins, but there is a reason why we're going to impasse. And that's because the two biggest issues that was identified earlier by Gary in the bargaining survey being, of course, money, always money, and then workload. And so we brought two of our superstars from the team in to share, because the bargaining teams, the bargaining sessions were live and open to anybody to watch. They could not be recorded. So a lot of people missed out on a lot of the information that was presented by our team. So I've invited Justin and Tammy in particular to present the information again that they had provided in the session. So I'm going to go to Justin first to talk about economics. Take it away, Justin. Make sure you come off mute.
Of course. All right. So, wrong button. Here we go. Hello, colleagues and community. As Dr. Christie said, my name is Justin Robinson, and I'm a math teacher at the International High School at Largo, at least for the next 6 days. But thank you all for taking the time out of your days to be here, either right now or via the recording, to engage with this work, because we do feel it's super important to make sure our system moves forward in the right direction. I guess my job today is to summarize why we are at impasse from an economics perspective. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk through 2 reasons why the board's offer is inadequate, followed by why we think they can do better. And then finally, I'll connect this conversation to working conditions, and then my colleague Tammy will take over. Maryland state law states that there shall be an increase of 10% over negotiated schedules by the end of the next 2 fiscal years. Even though the district had 5 years to do that, the first 3 don't count because they had already been negotiated before the law was passed. And unfortunately, the board's offers have not met this requirement, this legal requirement. They've made counters to get to 5% and 4% over the next 2 years, but that's not going to get us to 10%, obviously. So we do feel like, at this point, it's not appropriate to even accept their offer since they don't even meet the state law requirement. A bigger, I guess, more nuanced reason, though, is inflation. Not only was inflation especially high this year, but it has traditionally eaten up any COLAs that we've received. And I keep saying the word COLAs, we've all said the word COLAs, but I think it's important to emphasize that when we're saying COLA, what we should actually be saying is cost of living adjustment. So I think that gets lost sometimes. Saying cost of living adjustment emphasizes that the COLAs in our contract are supposed to help us keep up with inflation, and they're just not doing that. And so you can kind of see on the slide here, in the darker blue, these are the rates of inflation each year. And in the lighter blue, these are our contractual cost of living adjustments. And so over the next, over the last 5 years, there's been a 6.65% COLA, cumulative COLA. And then over the same time period, inflation has been 13.2%. So our purchasing power has been less over time, which of course is horrible. So again, as shown on the previous slide, our COLAs aren't keeping up with inflation. I'm sorry, our cost of living adjustments are not keeping up with inflation. In fact, even if inflation is 0% for the next 2 years, the 544 adjustments that the board has proposed, they will not catch up to Unit 1 members' purchasing power in 2018. And so if you think about it, this is really a pay cut for those at the top of the scale. And it's also a less attractive starting salary for new recruits. So on the left, you're seeing that, like, let's just pretend it's 0% inflation over the next 2 years, and the COLAs are not going to keep up. But realistically, however, and you see this on the right, inflation will grow. And it probably won't, well, I hope it's not 8%, just like it's been this year, but realistically, it might be around 3%. And you can see that even at that rate, there's going to be around a 10% gap between the purchasing power from 2018 to 2025. A significant theme in any discussion of the PGCPS budget has been the fund balance. The board likes to say that the fund balance is not something that can be used for ongoing expenses like salaries, and we agree to an extent. The problem has always been, I guess, answering the question of why we even have a fund balance. And so here are a couple reasons. One reason for the fund balance is that the board consistently leaves money on the table. And then the next year, during the budget reconciliation audit process, they make statements in the budget documents that say things like you see here on the screen. Statements will say something like, the balance is going up because the state or county has given more money than PGCPS is budgeted to receive. And I see a couple of issues with that. First, why can't they make better estimates like the rest of the districts in the region? Their fund balances aren't growing the same rate as ours are growing. And of course, the other issue is we're about to go into one of the biggest seasons of education funding increases in state history. 3 years from now, are we going to look back? Are we going to look at even higher fund balances because they didn't adequately project the scope of blueprint funding? Some of us will probably remember the slush fund that we talked about 3 years ago. We saw that during those contract negotiations, the fund balance was at $175 million. And in the intervening 3 years of this current contract, not only was that money not spent, but it grew to $292 million. And so if you think about it, over 3 years, that original $175 million could have raised the salaries for every one of the 20,000 employees by $3,000 a year. So when we think about the gap between what we propose as a starting salary and what the board has proposed as a starting salary, $3,000 is a significant gap, and it could help make our system more competitive in the region. The other reason for the fund balance is that the district consistently budgets more for things that aren't spent. And so you can see over time the amount that is underspent on Unit 1 salaries is growing. The budget is there, but it's not going to teachers, and I would bet primarily due to vacancies. Nevertheless, that money should not just go back in the general fund, because as classes have gone unfilled, who's been picking up the slack? It's been teachers and other Unit 1 members. We've been covering the classes, we've been doing the extra copying, the grading, all those kinds of things. And so when we think about the fact that it's our budget category that's contributing the biggest amount to the fund balance, it seems like we should get the biggest return from the fund balance. For those of you who've been watching the open bargaining sessions, this slide should look familiar. It shows the history of salary proposals and counter proposals from each side. And so you can kind of see the board's last offer is a cumulative COLA of 9.2% over the next 2 years. This slide should also look familiar. If we want to reduce our workload, the board needs to ensure that we have competitive salaries. Otherwise, who's going to want to work here? And so as we're thinking about the economics of this negotiation, it's important to connect it to working conditions, because if we want to actually make our working conditions better, one of the things that you do have to do is increase salaries so that we have more people to share the workload. So I don't know if I'm turning back over to Dr. Christie or to Tammy, but that's all I have for you today.
Yeah, before we go to Christy, because I just want to, or Tammy, I just want to make a couple comments on everything that you just said. One, on the fund balance is they'll refer to it as a rainy day fund, but the county council has said you don't need a rainy day fund. We are your rainy day fund. If you get yourself in a financial hardship, you come to the county council and it's our responsibility to make sure that you have what you need. So there's no need for a rainy day fund for the school system. The second, when we compare our salaries to those surrounding districts that you just showed, it's important to note that we have a much higher concentration of poverty in Prince George's County. We have many, many more schools that have been identified as community schools than those other counties based on the concentration of poverty in our district. And with concentrated poverty comes a lot of adverse childhood experiences. Those adversities cause trauma, and that trauma causes more challenges in the classroom that teachers have to overcome, that they have to, help those students cope, and they have to work extra hard to relate to those students, to get through to those students, to help them overcome the barriers that they're dealing with because of their situations. And so there is also, on top of having lower salaries, you do have to recognize the difference in our working conditions related to working in a district with high concentrations of poverty. So now we will go to Tammy, who will talk about workload and what the amount of planning time and what that means for our educators in their work-life balance. So go for it, Tammy.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Hello, my name is Tammy O'Donnell. I'm an English teacher at CMIT North High School. This week alone, our high school has lost 5 positions. 5 teachers have left the profession because of the workload, strictly because of the workload. It is too much. So let's talk about it. We know in our contract it says we have 225 minutes of uninterrupted planning time. But we also know from the survey, from talking to people, from seeing posts on Facebook and other social media, that we are not getting 225 minutes of uninterrupted planning time. So let me just show you something. I'm going to show a picture. So that, can you see that picture? Okay. So that is one assignment for my class. I have 130 students, and as is required, I have to put in 2 grades a week. So that's 260 papers I have to grade. And as an English teacher, we have to go through and read essays. We have to make meaningful comments. We have to check grammar. Sometimes we have to reteach, and we have to work with students. This is one assignment. This is one assignment. I can't get that done in 225 minutes. It's just impossible. So in 225 minutes for 260 papers, I have less than 45 seconds to grade each paper. 45 seconds for meaningful content for one assignment or 2 assignments. In those 225 uninterrupted planning time minutes that we get, we're also subbing for classes. We're also attending IEP meetings. We're going to department meetings. We're going to SBMT or leadership meetings. We're attending 504 meetings. We're working with students who were absent and have to make up work, so we have to reteach content, allow them time to complete their work, and then grade their work. We're going to SIT meetings. And all of this has an impact not only on us as educators, but also on our students. I can't get lesson planning done. Did you notice I didn't even list lesson planning? I don't have time to lesson plan. I don't have time to look at the curriculum, which, by the way, doesn't come out in a timely manner. So sometimes I've already started a quarter before I even get the curriculum for the quarter, but that's a whole other story. So we're not allowed to lesson plan. We don't have time to give meaningful feedback. A lot of times people will say, well, just don't assign so much work. Oh, okay, so I'm just going to give 5 points for breathing. Is that that's the grade this week? That's not why I got into education. We don't have a chance to give students an opportunity to see what they're doing in the class. I don't know about you, but I know that this week I got several emails saying, my student doesn't know what their grade's going to be because I haven't had a chance to put in grades this week. Or my student needs to make up some work from when they were absent. If we're not able to get grades in, if we're not able to grade during our planning period, then yes, we do have to take work home. And the expectation that that's happening, the idea that, well, you knew what you were getting into when you went into this profession, you knew you were going to have to take work home, that's just unreasonable and it's inhumane. To think that I'm going to spend 15 plus hours out of my family time, out of my personal time to grade papers at home when I should be spending time with my family, that number of hours spent outside the classroom grading has increased over at least 30% in the last 2 years. When COVID hit, we learned a lot of valuable lessons, but it doesn't seem like the board has really taken those lessons to heart. I think there are ways that we can do this work. What we're asking for is, a half a day a month to be able to have some quiet time to do some of this work that we're not able to get done during the course of our week. It's a chance to breathe for a second. It's a chance to collaborate with our colleagues on curriculum and different ideas that we have, cross-disciplinary projects that we could do that we're not able to do. So our level of commitment is still there, but we're just not being provided the time to do those things. And it's so important to the students. And they feel it. They can see how overwhelmed we are. And yet we're just told to keep doing it. Just keep that train moving. I know the wheels are falling off, but it's okay. You can use your feet, Flintstone style, and keep moving. It's unreasonable. So there is this idea that this is all about money, and it's not. This will cost the district nothing. This would cost the district nothing to take some of these things off of our plate. We're glad they took the attendance piece off of our plate. It never should have been on our plate to begin with. But there are other items on our plate that could be easily removed. All of these meetings that we're required to go to, all of these PDs that sometimes we just don't see a value in because we don't have any input on it. All of these days that we get for grading that were supposed to be half days and ended up being 2-hour early dismissals. These are all slaps in the face to what we're trying to do for our students. And we need to make sure that we are holding firm, that we make sure that we are getting a manageable workload so that we don't have to have 3 or 4 different jobs to pay our bills, so that we don't have to take home 20, 25 hours worth of work a week, so that we can also balance and relieve our own stress level and take care of our own mental health. That's important to us, as well as the money, as you saw in the slide that Gary provided. So thank you for the opportunity to share this. Thank you, Dr. Christie.
Thank you, Tammy. And I do just want to clarify, because you used the 225 number. So 225 is officially the language for elementary. The secondary language is 45 minutes a day, but if you do 45 times 5, it also equals 225. So she was just using a shorthand, so please don't jump down Tammy's throat that she said 225. All right, so now next up, and Christy, I love watching your facial expressions as we've gone through this. As legal counsel, watching your reactions to some of this has been amazing. So, but please help us understand what this means, because we haven't been able to come to agreement on our 2 most important issues. Even though we have come to a lot, we have declared impasse, which PGCA has not done. I'm not sure if ever, but certainly not in anybody's recent memory. And so we're inexperienced in this area. So if you could just help us understand what it means and what the process looks like moving forward.
Sure, thanks. As Donna said, my name is Christy Anderson. I'm the general counsel for MSCA. And I appreciate this opportunity. I happen to be serving as an interim chief negotiator in your neighboring county, which is even in worse shape than Prince George's County. But we are at impasse. We have been declared at impasse, but it's over the same issues. It's that work-life balance. It is about planning, individual planning time. It's about non-professional duties. And it's also about the money, and some other increases that are in there. But it really is this balance and finding this balance. And it's absolutely critical if these school systems are going to be able to recruit and retain educators, because I think Anne Arundel's facing the same problem as Prince George's County. They have the same budgetary tactics of over budgeting for instructional positions, but not hiring and filling those positions. They ended their year with a $68 million general fund balance. So they have the money. So therefore, we took them to impasse. We moved them fairly quickly to impasse. And what that means is once the paperwork is filed with the PSLRB, which is the Public School Labor Relations Board. There's paperwork that has to be filed. And as Gary referenced, there's a box on there that you can say it's either being filed jointly or it's being filed by the union, or it is, I don't know what the board's position is. So that was the box that Gary was forced to check, as he had no idea what the board's position was, because they, or what it was going to be, because they have not decided as to whether or not you guys are officially at impasse. I would anticipate that once that paperwork is filed, which my understanding is it is going to be officially, because you have to file it in person or via mail. And so that's going to happen today. And so the PSLRB will quickly review that and kick out a letter to the Board of Education almost immediately. If not by the end of the day today, it will be done on Monday. They will kick out a letter to the Board of Education asking them for their position. And they are given approximately a week to respond to that letter. So because the PSLRB is not going to declare impasse without considering where the board is. The board still has an opportunity to write a letter back saying, after considering it, we agree we're at impasse on these issues. So they'll try to probably narrow the list, but I don't know. I mean, it sounds like you guys have had tremendous success in some areas. It just seems to me it's like you're not going to get agreement on these final issues without somebody intervening. And so hopefully they're going to respond, yes, we're at impasse. And with it, once the PSLRB receives the board's response, which again, it's like a week, they're given about a week to respond. Once they receive that response, they then will almost immediately kick out a letter declaring you at impasse, declaring the parties at impasse, and they'll list out the items that are continuing to be at issue. And once that declaration comes out, that's what kicks some statutory timelines. Because within 5 days, 5 days of the declaration by the PSLRB, you have to select a mediator. Now, I have taken the position, there is no harm in trying to, as soon as that paperwork is filed with the PSLRB by PGCEA, start engaging the board in conversations about a mediator. Try and get an agreement on who the mediator is when you are declared at impasse. So as soon as you get the declaration, you can then contact that mediator and you can get some dates. And that way you don't have to get the declaration, then you've got 5 days to figure out who you're going to select. You can, the minute you get the declaration, you can contact the mediator. I tried to shortchange these timelines. I mean, the statute's pretty quick, but at the same time, the quicker you can move the process, you can avoid retroactivity and some of those other issues. So, but once you get the declaration, you've got 5 days to select a mediator. You also have 10 days to share with the PSLRB your last and best offers. I would suggest just doing that with your paperwork, because that has to get filed with the PSLRB as well as with the Board of Education. You can do it at the same time that you file the request for a declaration of impasse. But within 14 days after the declaration of impasse is issued, that's when you're supposed to commence mediation. And what that means is you should have in place within 14 days of that declaration. So that's 2 weeks within it's a 2-week time period. You have to have scheduled dates for the mediator within those 2 weeks. You have to, and these reports have to go back to the PSLRB. So if you're getting stonewalled by the board, the PSLRB, which has declared you at impasse, will intervene and push the process along and work with you in order to make sure that it's done. And then once mediation has commenced, you're supposed to complete the mediation within 25 days. And typically it depends on the mediator. You might spend 1 or 2 days at impasse. I will tell you, since this law has been passed, which is 2010, we have not had success in mediation. Every time we've gone to mediation, we have reached an agreement. In every county where we have done this process, we have reached an agreement. There is a possibility that you go through this process with a mediator and there's still no agreement. Because once you reach agreement, then it goes back to the parties to ratify and you're done. But so the question becomes, what happens if you still can't reach agreement at impasse? And if that's the case, what happens is the mediator would then be responsible for writing his report. And so that report then comes back to both parties. And within 5 days after receipt of the mediator's report, the parties can say they're going to accept it in full. They have to mutually agree to accept it in full. They could accept it in part. The parties could mutually agree to accept it in part, or they could reject it and request arbitration before the PSLRB. Now, when the mediator writes his or her report, they are either pulling language from the last and best offer from the union or the last and best offer from the school system, or it is representative of the discussions at the mediation table, and it might be some altered language from one of those. But typically the mediator's report is going to reflect the conversations that occur at the table. If that report is rejected and you request arbitration before the Public School Labor Relations Board, they have a hearing. Subpoenas are issued. Folks have to testify. They're subject to cross-examination before the PSLRB. And then within 20 days of that arbitration hearing, because the PSLRB has 20 days to schedule the arbitration hearing once they're notified that the report has been rejected and there's a request for arbitration. And then after the arbitration hearing, they have another 20 days to issue their decision, and it's final and binding on both parties. And what's interesting though is because it's issue by issue, in large part, it's actually the PSLRB looks at the last best offer of the union, the last best offer of the Board of Education, and the PSLRB looks at the mediator's report. So the PSLRB has to choose one of those. So after the hearing, the scope of their decision is limited to accepting or adopting one of those reports, the complete and final last best offer of the board, the complete final last best offer of the union, or the mediator's final settlement report. And we haven't gone through that process, so it's hard to say what the outcome of that would be. I would anticipate though, because you've gone through mediation, I would say 9 times out of 10, it's probably going to be the mediator's report that the PSLRB would likely adopt, because that's going to be reflective of your conversations at the table. So that's why when you go to mediation or impasse, you want to take, probably there might be some issues there that you could throw away, but that offer should be your best offer. I mean, you don't want extremes. You don't want to still continue to have 20% COLA on the table, because no mediator, and certainly the PSLRB, would not see that as reasonable. But so that last best offer has to show some compromise. Not that you're supposed to negotiate against yourself, because you certainly should not be negotiating against yourself. And that's the frustration when you get down to these last and final offers. The board's not making offers, because we have that situation in Anne Arundel. So their last best offer is nothing because they haven't countered, which is not a good position for the board to be in, but it does put you in a great position to move the process forward and to get an agreement. So that's essentially the process. But like I said, I always try to push these timelines up. So the minute the paperwork's filed, start talking to the board about who you're going to select as a mediator. And the minute that declaration comes out, you can pick your dates. And usually these mediators make themselves available within a couple of weeks, and you can try and get things scheduled. And like I said, every single time we've engaged in this process around the state, we have always reached an agreement through mediation. So that's hopeful for all parties involved that you can reach that agreement and you could start the school year with a fantastic contract. I'm impressed. You guys have done a great job.
Thank you, Christy. So we do have a few questions that have been coming in. I'm going to try to prioritize the ones that, because I know you have another meeting to go to. So if the rest of us have to go over, we can do that. But I know you have a meeting. So I'm going to try to prioritize the ones that I definitely would need to kick to you.
Okay.
And one is from Camilla Henry. She wants to know what happens if the Board of Education does not agree to impasse. If you just want to answer that again, because I think you covered it, but
so what happens is they have to file a report and it gets sent to the PSLRB, and the PSLRB might look at that and say, you're at impasse. I don't care. and just side with the union's paperwork and move the process forward and throw you into mediation. But if the PSLRB looks at the board's paperwork and they say, okay, maybe the parties aren't exactly at impasse yet. And they look at the number of meetings, the time in mutual discussions versus caucuses. I mean, they look at a whole lot of things and time on the topic, things of that nature. So they might say, okay, you haven't spent enough time on these items. I'm going to kick this back. You guys have to engage in further negotiations. They could do that, but that has to commence within 5 days of any kind of an order to go back into further negotiations. But you guys could go through another meeting and with the same result. So you file that request again, well, you file a letter with the PSLRB, not the same paperwork, but you file a letter with the PSLRB to say, this is why we're at impasse, because the conversations netted nothing. And so it gets kicked back to the PSLRB and then they declare impasse. I will tell you, given the number and the scope of the agreements that you have reached through this process, it seems to me that I can't imagine that the PSLRB won't declare impasse on these remaining items. There's always that slight chance, but I doubt it, regardless of what the board says. But they can kick you into further negotiations if they decide that you haven't spent enough time on these topics. You can have a meeting and then you write a letter to the PSLRB to update them. And then they have to, at that point, decide whether they're going to declare you an impasse and move the process forward.
Thanks. And so another question that it may be you, it might be Gary, is the question of retroactivity. Because things are not going into effect on July 1st with our new contract. Is it guaranteed retroactivity? And if not, what are the odds of having retroactivity?
I can comment on that a little bit. The union I was a teacher in and was the president of, we went to impasse a number of times, and they always included retroactivity, but you have to make that an agreement at the table. You have to say, okay, here is the salary that is going to be the salary for the next contract. And usually the board will agree to make it retroactive. That's always happened in Frederick County, but it's not a guarantee. They're not required. And Christy, let me know if I'm wrong. They're not required to do that. That would be a part of the discussions that we would have. And the tricky part for us will be the implementation of 11-month contracts that we have already agreed to under as a tentative agreement.
Right. And so from what I've heard, because I did actually receive that question from somebody last night with the 11-month, for example, the counselors moving to 11-month, that is not happening until we have an agreement. And so for all of those counselors out there trying to decide what to do with their summer, until we have you're free to go about the country and go about the world and go about having vacation, because you are not going to be 11-month until we have a settled contract. So you're free to, I don't want to steal somebody's tagline, but free to move about the country. I gotta reopen my phone because it closed down. Okay, so next question, and this one actually might be more for Justin, because I know he's our expert on the career ladder and national board certifications among this panel. And the question is from K Bob. Is basically MBCT being regarded as higher than doctoral degrees?
Okay, that's a good question. So a lot of the things that are in the blueprint law about national board, and it always says something like it's negotiated. And so the career ladder has to be a conversation between PGCEA and PGCPS, and I guess ASASP probably as well, within the next 2 years. So we'll probably have to have some more, like, I don't know the scope of what that's going to look like, but everything's negotiated, and it's not necessarily saying that national board will be higher than doctoral degrees. It's not like putting them against each other, but it's a conversation, and it could end up being something like a salary scale that looks like that, but it's not like a guarantee. It's all a conversation. Yeah. Now, as far as the dollar amounts though, typically speaking, our doctoral lane change is not a $10,000 jump. So if you want to look at it like that, like $10,000 is for a national board is substantial, and compared to a doctoral lane jump, it hasn't historically been $10,000. So that provides any clarity. But again, it's not something that we can say for definitive. Has to be negotiated.
Yeah.
And I'll just add to that, if I can, we have reached tentative agreement on a joint blueprint committee between PGCEA and PGCPS. So these things will be worked out between the two sides. And we've had 3 of our very capable team members have already been working with the system on that. And so that is already a tentative agreement that will continue for the next 3 years.
Absolutely. Yeah. I can't always say that the school system is collaborative with us, but I will say when it comes to figuring out and understanding this blueprint, and a lot of that's been facilitated by a grant that the University of Maryland has, is that so far those conversations have been very collaborative. Justin and along with Dr. Rainier Miller have been really instrumental in understanding and working through that. So why are the
Kimberly Reese as well has been.
Yeah, Kim Reese is on the committee too. I was just anything NBCT, I go to Rainier. And then Justin has read the blueprint inside and out. He has it all very pretty color coded and
in a spreadsheet, of course.
in a spreadsheet, yeah, and has actually kind of created almost the career ladder that is currently under consideration. But the follow-up question was why push for the big bonuses? Those are actually in the blueprint. Those bonuses actually were legislated by our legislature. Our members of the legislature that served on the Kerwin Commission really bought in to the NBCT concept. I'll say as a member of the MSEA Board of Directors, we weren't always in agreement with that, especially because it leaves out a lot of our members, because it specifically says NBCT. So lobbying efforts have been and continue to occur at the state level to expand that language out to include more national board certifications into that funding. It's not that the local can't provide parity for the other national board certifications, but that has to be negotiated, and that same funding stream that's funding it for NBCTs is not coming from the state for those other national certifications. So we did make movement to improve the other national board certifications, but we have not achieved parity.
And just quickly on that, the county is now funding the full $4,000 money for non-NBCT national certifications, but we also pushed them that because the state's reimbursing on the $10,000, that they should not just stop their funding for national board. That's how we got to the $13,000, which is probably the highest in the state, but also the $4,000 contractually guaranteed to non-NBCT. We wanted much more. We wanted parity, but we weren't able to get that.
Yeah. So just kind of, I think this is the last question I have, and it's on the same thread, same conversation about national board certification, is what is the alternative pathway to getting that same salary? Or, because basically it's a salary enhancement when you're national board, you're going up a career ladder, and Justin, maybe you want to go a little bit more into detail on that, of what there are extra job responsibilities. You're not getting the money for doing nothing. You're entering a career ladder that comes with additional responsibilities, correct?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I guess it's kind of important to kind of start with like the purpose behind it. Like we've talked ad nauseum about like the number of vacancies, and part of the reason for that is people don't see being in the classroom long-term as a viable career path. And so this whole career ladder aspect is like a response to that. It's a response to the fact that, just in general, there are fewer and fewer people who are interested in teaching as being a viable career long-term. And so a lot of the funding is it's because of that idea. And so the way it works is, there are, just like you can imagine a ladder, I kind of envision it like stair steps, basically. And you start off as like a regularly certified teacher. Once you get national board certification, it allows you to consider going into this next phase of the ladder that we don't already have. And so in this next phase, there are 3 steps or 3, I don't even know how to say it. 3 steps, I guess, is the best way to say it. But the 3 are called lead teacher, distinguished teacher, and professor, distinguished teacher. What's important about all of these, though, is that they all require you to spend time in the classroom, which is different than how most promotions typically work in education, where the higher your pay and the more, I guess, more selective the position, it takes you further and further away from the kids. And so the way that Blueprint writes this whole teaching time requirement is it says, on average, teachers should spend 60% of their time in the classroom. And that's true for beginning teachers up until you get national board certification. Once you move into the teacher leadership track, then those percentages decrease, but they never get to 0. So I want to say it's 50%, 40%, and then 20% as you go up to those next 3 levels of teacher leadership. The question I think you read said like, what are the other options or tracks? And so like, if you're not interested in pursuing national board certification, the administration track still exists. Currently, like as things are now, it is okay to go on that track without national board certification. That will expire. I forgot the date off the top of my head, but like there's a time after which all principals and assistant principals will need to be national board certified as well. But right now, that's not the case. So for somebody who's teaching right now in this present moment, you know, in terms of getting that higher salary without national board certification, is still possible through administration. However, that will not be an option in the future.
Right. And so, yeah, national board certification is kind of becoming very, very important. And so I know we've talked internally. I know because Dr. Miller currently runs that program, and there's obviously going to be a lot more interest in people getting nationally board certified as a result. And so there's going to need to be some growth in that department as well to be able to facilitate more people getting nationally certified. But I believe, and Justin, correct me if I'm wrong, the estimate, it would be an expectation of 20% of our workforce achieving national board certification. Right now, I think Rainey had told me last, we're at like 2% of our workforce is nationally board certified. And under the blueprint conceptualization, 20% of our workforce would need to be nationally board certified in order for this to all magically work out. So there is one last question that I wish, unfortunately, Christy Anderson did have to drop off, and I'm not sure if this was a question for her, but can PGCPS change their minds on items they've already tentatively agreed to? And we might have to Gary, I don't know if you're comfortable answering that in this form, but we might have to follow up with Christy.
They can try anything that they want to try. We will obviously argue that they cannot go back on tentative agreements that were made. I have a feeling they think that perhaps, particularly around money, they can switch some things around, take from here, bring it there. But our argument will be that things that were tentatively agreed to should not be brought into impasse, including financial items.
Dr. Windsor.
Thank you, Gary. I was going to mention that Mr. Burnett, Howard Burnett, alluded to such at the last meeting. Like he suggested they would take away the 11-month if we really wanted to press the issue for COLAs. And I think that's to sow division amongst the membership. So we need to watch their divide and conquer tactics that they're putting forth at this time.
And our argument, as Justin keeps pointing out ad nauseum, is they have the money to do all the things that we've agreed on, plus an improved salary package. So we're not conceding that to get to a settlement, they need to rob Peter to pay Paul. That is, we will argue hardly against that if that's the position that they bring in.
Absolutely. And at the end of the day, for all of this, we have astronomical shortages in the teaching profession. We are working under very challenging situations, and now we're in a place and time in our world where educators who didn't sign on to be barriers to bullets are. We have educators now that come to work worried that, is this my last day on earth because I'm going to work in a school, and schools don't feel like safe places anymore. So that's layered on top of all of this.
Tammy's hand is up.
Tammy, go ahead, because I was going to go down another rabbit hole. So go ahead, Tammy. You're on
You're on
mute.
mute.
Thank you. I got a text question from a colleague who asked, what is the support like within the county, like the county executive, the state legislature, like what does that look like for us, and what kind of support are they lending us in terms of this contract?
Absolutely. So we do have support back then. We're going to be talking to members of our delegation after I get off this call. We've drafted a letter. We're hoping that they will sign on to support. That does, one of the talking points from the other side has been that the blueprint money, maybe it'll come, maybe it won't. We don't know. We can't count on it. And so a letter from the delegation saying the money is real. It is coming. We worked hard in Annapolis to bring that money in. And so we do have support there. Like I said, as I mentioned before, conversations with the county council, that rainy day fund is unnecessary. So they have provided that level of support, and I'll be having more asks of them in relation to that. And I've also had conversation with the county executive regarding the position and relationship between the school system and labor and union relationships. And are we really a pro-labor, pro-union district? And so those conversations are all happening at the political level. So yeah. And I do want to say, for our community members that are out there, all of this sounds like very teacher first, but the way we really truly see it is it's all student first. There's the saying out there, you have to put your own oxygen mask on first. And our teachers can't take care of your children when they're not being taken care of themselves. And if I have educators that are sitting in their cars crying before they go into work and crying in their cars when they leave work because they're so overwhelmed, they can't be there for your kids. When your kids are hurting and your educator is hurting, it's not a good mix. When everybody is in school in pain, and not able to support one another, it's just not a good mixture. And so we need to do more. It's great to have platitudes of saying, I care so much about the health and welfare of our educators, but you keep layering on more and more workload, and you're not meeting us at the table regarding that issue. It's great to say, I can't thank you enough for all that you do, except that there are many, many more ways, and we presented them with you at the table on how to thank us more. So with that being said, Tammy, did you have one?
I'm sorry, I had one last comment to that. With all of these positions being open, people leaving the workforce early, people leaving the workforce retiring because they can't take anymore. I, as a parent in the district as well, I'm concerned that these class sizes are going to become astronomical. That you're going to go from having 25 students in a class to having 40 students in a class, because there just aren't enough teachers, and you got to get all the kids in at one time. And it's very difficult. Like you said, this is a crisis right now, and it's not just about the teaching profession. It's about education, the system as a whole. It's about what we're doing as a county. And all of this is going to have a detrimental effect on student learning if we let it continue.
Absolutely. When I say that it's a crisis in the classrooms, I don't mean that to be exaggerating. I truly believe we are at the table trying to save the profession and trying to save the system, and that every proposal we put on the table has been intended to do that, to save the system, to save our educators. We cannot fill a bucket with a giant gaping hole in it. And right now, that's what our staffing is there's a bucket for staffing and it has a giant hole, and we can't put water in it faster than it's running out the bottom. And it's something, change has to happen in order for our school system to actually move the needle on those test scores and those star ratings that we value so much, that we test the heck out of students. We're not going to raise those test scores. We test, but we're not doing what we need to actually raise those scores. So the tests are pointless. We know what they're going to say. They're going to say the same thing they've always said, because we haven't done anything differently. So thank you all for being with us this morning. I have some phone calls to make, and as I just talked about. So I am going to bid you all adieu. And I will see you all soon. Please enjoy your summers. And I know the bargaining team will be on call for when we go to have those mediation sessions. Thank you all for all that you do.